In this video, Peter and I are talking about curriculum and instruction in old school Japanese martial arts schools. And the topic comes up quite often in our conversations with school owners and instructors, as well, of course, in seminars, and it's come up a couple of times now in the comments, and so we decided to have a conversation about that. Peter is an incredible resource on this. He ran a successful Jinenkan Dojo in LA for many years, and we both have come to think of instruction as well as skill acquisition in really different ways in the last few years, especially since studying ecological dynamics and the constraints-led approach. So I hope you enjoy this conversation, and we will see you in the comments.
You found a question about curriculum, and you're the right person to ask about this. What do they have to say about curriculum?
Yeah, so the question or the request is, I'd love to hear more about what you and others think of evolving the art, our martial art, into something more curricular. And they do mention also that, like in the Bujinkan, there's more than one Bujinkan school that proposed or implemented colored belts to keep track of who was taught what. And that I guess we can look at the ranking system as a model of tracking curriculum progress as a additional question.
Yeah, good idea. So you really primed, you'd probably be the best person to address this because you actually ran a full-time school for many years. I ran multiple training groups. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, from Massachusetts to Miami and a couple of locations. I ran training groups for many years. And for us, curriculum, was, like we've said in other videos, what is it that I think we need to work on? Because I don't really have all the material, but we're all going to just work on this stuff together. Advance and rank more, and then I became more of a senior member with a lot of experience. And so trying to teach from experience, but never really having a curriculum outside of eventually having a whole bunch of books and videos and then folders of notes, right? And so it was still just hunting and pecking and kind of like sniping at kata to say, maybe this is what we should be working on today. And like we discussed before, those outdoor training days, really not knowing what you're doing and trying to make up ways to solve problems might actually be super effective. But from your perspective, you actually had to create a curriculum for students that was also tied into belt ranking in a formal organization in the Jinenkan, right? So you had a whole bunch of layers of accountability that you had, your accountability to your students as well as to your teacher in Japan. So what are some of your thoughts on curriculum now compared to what you did then?
Yeah, and it is absolutely a very circular, or fortunately, I guess, potentially spiral conversation to have. I say spiral in hopes because I'm sure we'll revisit some things and learn new things along the path. But one of the things that was a reality for me is that I had, if I'm going to sign people up, charge them money, tell them you're going to show up at this time on this day and train with these people, part of the promise is you're going to get something out of it. And if I have no plan to deliver that something, I'm just lying to them. So it was only appropriate in that circumstance where I'm essentially doing an exchange. Like you give me money, I'll give you a thing. Then that thing had to exist. And for me, it was the implementation of a plan. Now, lesson plans, you don't have to have a long-term curriculum to develop a good lesson plan. I think it obviously is effective to do so. I did both, and we'll discuss lesson planning and curriculum planning more specifically another day. But for me, I looked at curriculum in part saying, okay, what's easiest to accomplish in a somewhat linear fashion, right? Like start with the easy stuff. I'm not going to ask the day one person to do something that they can't do. That's just frustrating. But that still has to be planned. If I didn't know that, if I didn't think of that, I might think, oh, this is cool. Let me show it to you because you'll think our stuff is cool. And then when they fail at it, inevitably, they'll realize, oh, I made a bad choice. I shouldn't have come to train here. This place sucks. I didn't want that. So if I can't deliver the product to them of skill building if I make them want to quit earlier. So I would have failed in my job that way. So I have to step it into them in a way that they can progress and make a sense of, hey, I'm getting something out of this. If they don't feel it, they won't stay. and they won't get better. And if they don't actually get better, then I'm just spinning their wheels. That's no good. Now, on the most basic level, the curriculum is to say, what are the things I need to accomplish? Knowing, hey, they don't have any of them. So this was super easy. In many cases, in education, like in academic education, other than like nursery school, you're presuming that you're building on some prior knowledge. If you walked into something like the Bujinkan, Jinenkan, Genbukan, odds are pretty high that that person doesn't have, if they're a new student, doesn't have some prior relevant experience, even if it's martial arts. This is just new stuff. It's just a new thing. You can start from zero. You don't know all the stuff that we're going to say, what the words we're going to say them. I want you to know all the words. I want you to be able to do all the things and ideally be good at it. Okay, it's just a list of things at that point. So what are all the things? What are the ones that they could probably do earlier? Put them in the beginner program. What are the things they can do if they're okay at it? Put them in the middle of the program. And then you just break it up. For me, it was very simple math at that point. Now, what's interesting is we're deep into this, non-linear method of skill acquisition now as like the golden rule. And most of the constraints-led approach people, most of the CLA people, say like you can't use a curriculum. And yeah, the dislike for curriculum though is not about, they say, obviously they're going to say, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff you should work on, but it's usually guided toward, hey, if you're struggling with this thing, let's keep working on that thing a different way, so that you have a bunch of tasks to accomplish and you'll get good at the thing because you want to get good at the thing. There's no requirement to, like if you're in a BJJ school and you're working a particular, I want to be able to roll the guy off of me from bottom of mount. Find a different ways to trap their arm so they can't post it out there is a great goal. If the person's struggling, just keep working on it. You work on it different ways. Try it with your hands, try it with your arm, try it with your elbow, try it with two hands. Oh, fine, you found some ways. Great, let's move on to something else. There's no requirement to also do, I guess guard pass that day. But for me, I said, look, this is all the stuff, and you're going to train for this many months in a row here and learn them in this block. Well, damn, if we don't do these 3 things today or these 2 things, whatever the lesson plan called for, we're not going to get through the stuff. You're not going to do it enough times and see all this stuff. I will have failed. Now, I think, and somebody's going to prove me wrong, but I'm pretty solid on this, is you can still take the list of stuff and develop it as much as you can during the assigned time block. And it's okay that people don't master it that day. In fact, other research shows that coming back to a thing is good. Right? You have the skill degradation and deprecation that comes as you do like a warm-up back into class. We're just taking advantage of that same system for learning. Say, hey, you did this last week. You were okay at it. Let's do it again this week. Oh, look, you're a little better at it. Or once you warmed up again to it, you're like, oh yeah, this idea. You can move again. To me, that fits perfectly. It's not contrary to the CLA approach to have a list of things you want to get through that day and just say, hey, I've got 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever the assigned time spot is for this thing. Work that thing. And you know what? If you tell them we're going to work this until you're good at it, 2 things happen. One, they think, well, damn, like what if I'm not getting good at it? I'm holding everybody back. All right, everyone else is good at it. I'm bad at it. I'm the new guy or what have you. And the other half of it is the other people are waiting. They really are like, hey, I'm pretty good at this thing. Like, well,
yeah.
Can we just let John practice this on the side there? Because me and Bob want to practice this next thing. And I don't think it's an effective way to say only work until somebody's good at it. Yeah. And I think a really golden opportunity there is missed if you work until a high level of skill. Because if you walk away from failure, if you walk away from imperfection and say, oh, we got to keep going till we're perfect, you're undermining the message of the CLA. And you want people to be comfortable with striving against difficulty. Hey, this is really hard. I'm having a hard time with it. Cool. I'm going to keep working hard. I'll just come back another time, work hard. It's not quitting. Say, hey, we got more things to do. That's a good life pattern to have. Is to say, hey, I find this difficult. I'm going to apply myself really well. All right, I'm going to also do this other thing that's difficult and apply myself really well. Struggle, enjoy it. Enjoy the struggle. Enjoy the discomfort. That's the whole point. That's how you get good at facing adversity.
You mentioned a couple of different things, and you mentioned a way that they can be compatible. And I'm also hearing ways that where maybe they might not be compatible. So in your old way of doing things, it sounded like a very linear way of teaching the curriculum and what we would now call information processing. The theory behind information processing, way of coaching and skill acquisition, or perhaps just choreography memorization, depending on what what sport you happen to be practicing or what art you happen to be practicing, is that the brain is a giant computer. I'm now going to feed this a whole bunch of information in a linear way and have the person, the automaton, right? The person that as a coach you're trying to get to comply with your instructions, do things to a certain level of perfection in your eyes. And so that would be one way of like what you're saying of trying to practice to as close to a level of perfection for that day as possible, where that would be at odds with throwing somebody into a situation where they need to solve a problem, they feel uncomfortable. Now, in the information processing part of it is that the scenario I think you laid out was if you were to just throw somebody in the middle of class and there's a whole bunch of language, some of it in English, some of it in Japanese, a whole bunch of movement that they've never done, and just say, good luck. And you're also coaching in a linear way, then that person is going to be immediately overwhelmed and they might not show up for the next class, or they might quit your school very soon because they just are feeling overwhelmed and they just don't know where to go. And so in that information processing way, if you are choosing to coach like that, then it makes sense that you would have a curriculum and a syllabus and you would have belt ranks and all of the students would know exactly what things do I have to memorize to please coach to get to this next belt rank or this next Q level. Now, we've talked about for the last number of years, we've been deep into the ecological dynamics and the constraints-led approach, where actually what you're inviting is discomfort, where you're inviting is having students learning how to find comfort in discomfort. It's where they realize that they're not going to perfect some particular thing that day, but they are going to get better at solving tasks, solving different types of problems. So, with the constraints-led approach, so exactly what we've been talking about for years now is you have something, say you have a list of things to do. That list of things to do in our case might be many different kata from a handful of lineages. That could be a list of things to do. You could break it down even further and say, what are these themes that keep showing up in the kata from the various lineages, and the various scrolls within the lineages? All right, cool. Here's a set of problems that keeps coming up. Let's practice solving these problems. You're not going to perfect anything. You are going to get better every time you revisit trying to solve these types of problems. Great. And then on the other side of it, you realize I am running a traditional Japanese martial arts school, and students would like to know the names of things. And so they can practice a whole bunch of different skills, and then you can label those skills different things that they can put in their notebook, and they have a sense of accomplishment. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Not only am I really good at solving problems, also this stuff came up in this old school Japanese lineage, and now I have names for them. And so you have that direct cultural connection. You have a direct connection to the lineage. Does that make sense? If you were to be
it does.
Running a martial arts school right now, how would that maybe be different from what you did before, knowing now what you know now?
So you're absolutely right to point out that with the way I was running the LA school in the Jinenkan, very information processing, very linear. And that was the model. That's exactly what we're trying to do. Say, you have to learn this thing to reach this level of skill and rank. And then once you've done that, you should learn this thing to get to that level of skill and rank. I did use a spiral curriculum because I knew, okay, in the Jinenkan, there are these very specific milestones to hit. You may as well start practicing them early. So we would do the things if you've ever picked up Manaka Sensei's book, there's actually some percentages in there. Spend this much time training this thing, this much time training that thing. It was really helpful. The book didn't come out until I was already running the school, but I was very glad that the ratios had not changed since I set up my curriculum. So I was like, oh, good. No one reading the book thought like, what's this guy doing? He's just making it up as he goes. But knowing that, for example, very early on, all you have to worry about in that organization is taijutsu. So can you do a correct, punch and kick and roll and all of the very fundamental movements? So we just did them all, even though you weren't going to be tested for them for much later. So do them all. And then ideally I was trying to challenge the students to get good at them, and they would. I was definitely a little bit of a black sheep in the Jinenkan, so I'm not there anymore. So I wasn't strictly doing, you must be good at this thing this way. I would allow for challenge and let people try things that made it more difficult for themselves. But you had to accomplish those things by that time. Now, today, I still think there are things that are easier and more difficult. And that's just nominal versus functional difficulty is the modern parlance for that differentiation, right? Is it nominally difficult or is it functionally difficult? And for the example that you've probably seen if you've read some of these books, is shooting a free throw from the free throw line is easier for everyone than it is from half court. Period. That is just more difficult to do it from further away. Whereas for some individual capacities are going to change that for people. If you're all at the free throw line, you'd have an easier time if you were taller. You'd have an easier time if you were just not blindfold. Well, you can make things more difficult. Anyways, nominal, functional difficulty, different conversation day. Sidetracked easily. Now, today though, I would say use a list at a bare minimum. Here are the things I need to accomplish, and then break them up by an appropriate amount of time. I would more strongly differentiate. And there I just called it the basic class for the intermediate class. The intermediate class there, we focused on kata. Mostly because it was more interesting to people who wanted to learn the things, right? That's where you learn a lot of the names of stuff. But I would now not necessarily look at it as a skill differentiator, say, hey, work on these things, got to still time block them, but just add more challenge to learn it on their own, to self-discover the thing I'm trying to get them to learn. And when they don't do the thing, it's okay. That's the big difference, is it's okay if they don't do the thing I meant for them to do the way I meant for them to do it. In all the iterations, at some point, if I'm doing my job correctly, they stumble across it. Like I roll BJA 4 days a week rather. And I have tried to get people to do things that I thought, I wonder if this person's going to learn this thing if I give them this task. And I have found ways of getting people to do pretty odd, like to do like classic, like Omote, Gyaku, and Takayore. You do it to someone and they're like, oh, that really works, and they do it to somebody else. But Omote and Gyaku don't automatically come up in that way of rolling around unless you give goals of like pin their arm, like anchor it to the floor. If you're trying to stand up while you pin the person down, it works better if their arm is twisted one way or the other. And if you give them the reason to explore that, they do that. For them, I don't bother letting them know, oh, in classical Japanese martial arts, the thing you did is called this, this thing or that thing. They don't care. But it is fun to set up tasks where they'll still learn to do those things.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if that could be a fun game for a Bujinkan, well, anybody, but because a lot of our audience are Bujinkan type folks. I wonder if they learned what an Americana is. And if they put themselves into an Americana, and then their job then was to actually just get up. Right. So now they have a hand, but so they were not in full Americana. They have their They have one arm pinned to the floor. So they're kind of like low onto their opponent, and they're on the top of the mount, right? And so then at that point, how might you stand up safely and escape from that situation if you're not trying to then submit somebody or break their arm? That would be a cool way to learn, what does Ura Gyaku feel like getting up out of that situation? Because the arm or Omote Gyaku, depending on how they get up and depending on how you get up. So, I just think it's a pretty cool to reverse engineer that thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So a little insider baseball is with, so back up a step. I'm also, or was, I've now let the certification lapse, but I was a certified instructor under the Gracie survival tactics system for law enforcement. And in there, one of the things we practiced was, and taught, was going from an Americana lockup, which us in the ex-cons will recognize more like an onikodaki look, but a very specific grip, because they're also a very linear information processing model. So going from an Americana to an arresting position, to a handcuffing position, which is going to rotate their hand, we're going to pronate their arm, which for us would be an Ura Gyaku. And to get them from pinned to the floor Americana style to pronated into an arrest and control position.
I never even going with this.
They were learning Ura Gyaku, like classic control, wrist, elbow turn, like hip and shoulder turn, like everything. If you divorced the look and put it into, hakama and dogi and obi, you'd say like, oh, hey, they're clearly practicing classical martial arts.
Right.
And I would name it at that point, hey, you did this thing. And it's so fun to see the parallels develop. So you can learn all this stuff. And then that's the difference, right? For the GST program, we labeled it, the move into handcuffing. For the Takamatsu-den lineages, you would say you were going from onikodaki to Ura Gyaku.
I'm just imagining, do you find yourself like in the top of mount, is something similar to, pinning a hand to the hand and, wrist and hand or arm to the floor, and then needing to roll somebody onto their stomach. You might find yourself going through something that, if you were to take a snapshot in time, it might look like the ending of Ura Gyaku. It might look like Dogaeshi, where you're just sort of like holding fingers, wrist, or something similar, hand, something similar, controlling the rest of the arm to then rotate somebody onto their stomach, possibly for handcuffing.
Yeah. And even there, I know you and I have talked about this a bunch, but I want you, viewer, to recognize that, like, so when we just discussed, if you're in the mount going from Americana to handcuffing position, in our lineages, within the Takamatsu lineages, again, you and I have talked about this a bunch. We've found all the iterations where they're present. You're going to find mount. You're going to find what we're going to call that, half Omote Gyaku, half onikodaki, that we're going to label in the other world as an Americana. All this stuff is in there. So if you're diligently practicing these things, you have to say, hey, where are these parallels existing? I don't want to derail the curriculum discussion too much, but that has to include it because it's in the list. If you read your kata, like one of the times it's labeled as ura nami, like uma nori. Sorry, not surfing. Uma nori. So you're. I want to go to the beach. Damn it. One of the times in the lineages, in the kata, you see uma nori, like to mount the person like you're riding a horse. It's probably why they called it mount once it got translated in Brazil all those years ago. Because that's the word we use in English too. So using the other skills you have in that context is not weird. It's just they specialized in it and somehow it got differentiated. I don't know. I grew up doing judo, so obviously I'm biased to thinking grappling is and throwing each other grappling on the ground is normal.